The first bell of the day echoed through the halls of Crestwood Elementary, a modest suburban school in Kansas City. The chatter of students filled the air as they settled into their classrooms, ready for another day. Room 206 had an unusual energy about it, part excitement, part curiosity. A new teacher, Ms. Albright, was taking over the fourth grade class after the sudden retirement of their beloved Mr. Daniels. Ms. Albright, a woman in her mid-40s, walked into the classroom with a clipboard in one hand and a tight, practiced smile. Her pale blue dress and neatly coiffed hair gave her a polished appearance, but her eyes darted around the room like she was scanning for trouble. "Good morning, class," she said, her voice sharp but controlled. "I expect nothing less than your best behavior. Let's make this a productive year." The students exchanged glances. Some whispered to their neighbors about her no-nonsense demeanor. She wasn't like Mr. Daniels, who greeted each child by name and always started the day with a light-hearted joke. Among the students was Darnell, a soft-spoken and intelligent boy with a love for science and history. At 10 years old, he already carried himself with a quiet confidence, but today he sat a little more reserved than usual. He'd heard whispers about Ms. Albright being strict, but nothing prepared him for how her eyes lingered on him a fraction too long when she scanned the room. "Darnell," she called suddenly, her voice slicing through the classroom hum. "What's so fascinating out that window?" Caught off guard, he quickly straightened. "Sorry, ma'am. I was just—" "Don't ma'am me," she interrupted. "Pay attention. You'll need it." The words hung in the air, silencing the other students. Darnell felt his cheeks burn as he stared down at his desk. He wasn't used to being singled out, and certainly not for something so minor. He had barely looked away for a second. Ms. Albright moved on, starting a lesson on fractions, but Darnell could still feel her eyes on him occasionally. Each time he made the smallest movement, her gaze would flicker toward him, as if waiting for an opportunity to pounce. By lunchtime, he had already been called out 3 more times, for holding his pencil wrong, for asking a classmate a question, and for not erasing a mistake fast enough. Other students began noticing too, their faces mirroring the discomfort Darnell felt. In the teacher's lounge that afternoon, Ms. Albright sat with her coffee, her smile replaced with a subtle frown. "That boy Darnell," she said to a colleague, her voice low but pointed. "He's trouble waiting to happen. You can just tell." Meanwhile, in the cafeteria, Darnell quietly ate his sandwich, his thoughts racing. He couldn't understand why she treated him so differently. Had he done something wrong? His best friend, Malik, leaned over and whispered, "Don't let her get to you, man. She's just weird." Darnell nodded, forcing a small smile, but the knot in his stomach tightened. This was just the first day. As the weeks went on, it became clear to everyone in room 206 that Ms. Albright had a target: Darnell. Her tone with him was sharper, her expectations higher, and her punishments harsher. If another student forgot to raise their hand, it was a gentle reminder. If Darnell did the same, it was a public reprimand. "Darnell, do you enjoy disrupting my class?" she snapped one morning when he tried to clarify an assignment. "If you don't start following the rules, maybe you'd prefer to spend your time in the principal's office." The room went silent. No one dared to speak up, not even Malik, who exchanged a nervous glance with Darnell. The classroom had become a stage for Ms. Albright's unpredictable outbursts, and everyone was walking on eggshells. At home, Darnell tried to hide his frustration. He was close to his father, Mr. Harris, the principal of Crestwood Elementary, but he didn't want to burden him. He knew his dad was already busy managing the school and mentoring other staff members. Besides, Darnell didn't want to seem like he couldn't handle things on his own. "How's Ms. Albright's class?" Mr. Harris asked one evening over dinner. "It's fine," Darnell replied, poking at his mashed potatoes. "Just fine." Darnell hesitated. "Yeah, she's strict, but it's okay." His mum, a social worker, chimed in. "Strict isn't always bad, but if it gets out of hand, you let us know, all right?" Darnell nodded, forcing a smile, but inside he felt torn. Should he say something? Or would that make things worse? The breaking point came on a Monday morning when Ms. Albright handed back a science project the class had worked on for 2 weeks. Darnell had spent hours researching, building and perfecting his model of the solar system. He was proud of it, and his classmates had even complimented his work. But when she placed his grade in front of him, his heart sank. A big red C scrawled across the page. "Ms. Albright?" he asked, raising his hand. I don't understand. I followed all the guidelines. What did I do wrong? Her eyes narrowed. Oh, you followed the guidelines. Really? Then why does your project look like it was thrown together in 20 minutes? Maybe if you spent less time distracting others and more time focusing, you'd do better. Darnell felt the weight of every pair of eyes in the room. His cheeks burned as he tried to fight back tears. He had worked so hard, and she dismissed it as if it meant nothing. Can I see the rubric? He asked quietly, his voice trembling. No, she snapped. If you have a problem, you can discuss it after class. The dismissal stung. He slumped in his seat, his confidence chipped away once again. That night, Darnell sat at his desk, staring at a blank notebook. He didn't want to tell his dad yet, but he knew he needed to keep track of everything that was happening. He titled the page, Notes on Ms. Albright, and began writing. She gave me a C on my solar system project, without explaining why. Said I was distracting others when I wasn't. Called me out 3 times today for no reason. By the time he was done, the page was full. He hid the notebook under his bed and made a silent promise to himself. If things didn't improve, he'd show it to someone. At school the next day, Ms. Albright's behavior was the same. But something in Darnell had shifted. He didn't feel as helpless as before. Each time she picked on him, he made a mental note, determined to document everything. During recess, Malik noticed Darnell scribbling in his notebook and asked, "What are you doing?" "Just writing stuff down," Darnell replied. "About her?" Malik asked, jerking his thumb toward the classroom. Darnell nodded. "You gonna show it to someone?" "Maybe," Darnell said. "Not yet." Malik looked at him with a mix of admiration and concern. "Man, you're braver than me. She's scary." Darnell didn't feel brave, but he knew he had to do something. He couldn't let her keep treating him like this. The days dragged on, each one feeling heavier than the last. Ms. Albright's treatment of Darnell grew more aggressive, and her mask of professionalism started to slip. The other students noticed it too, though they remained silent, their gazes dropping whenever her voice turned sharp. "Darnell, how many times do I have to tell you to check your work before turning it in?" she barked one afternoon, after grading his math quiz. She slammed the paper on his desk with a red B circled at the top. "If you're going to waste my time, I suggest you start paying closer attention." Darnell clenched his jaw, swallowing the urge to defend himself. He knew his answers were correct. He had triple-checked them before submitting, but arguing would only make it worse. He slid the paper into his folder and made another entry in his notebook later that evening. "She said I wasted her time. My quiz was fine." Slammed my paper on my desk in front of everyone. One Wednesday morning, the tension in room 206 reached a boiling point. The students were working quietly on a group project, assembling presentations about famous historical figures. Darnell's group was assigned George Washington Carver, and he had eagerly volunteered to do the research. As he shared his findings with his group mates, Ms. Albright hovered nearby. She watched him intently, her lips pursed. When she finally spoke, her words cut through the classroom like a whip. "Darnell, you're dominating the conversation. Let someone else have a turn for once." The room fell silent. His classmates looked at each other, unsure how to react. Malik hesitated before saying, "But we asked him to explain. He's the one who found the most research." Ms. Albright's glare shifted to Malik, silencing him instantly. "Group work is about collaboration," she snapped. "Not a one-man show." The humiliation hit Darnell like a wave. He lowered his head, his hands gripping the edges of his chair. He could feel the stares of his classmates, though none dared to speak again. Later that day, during lunch, Malik finally broke the silence. "This is getting ridiculous," he said, lowering his voice. "She's out for you, man. You have to tell someone." "I'm keeping track of everything," Darnell replied, tapping the side of his backpack. "But I don't want to make it worse by running to my dad yet." "What if it doesn't stop?" Malik asked. Darnell sighed. "Then I'll deal with it when it gets too far." Little did he know that moment would come sooner than he expected. The turning point arrived on a rainy Friday morning. Ms. Albright had assigned a pop quiz, and Darnell, who always prepared for class, breezed through the questions. But as he handed in his paper, she gave him a look that sent a chill through him. By the time the quizzes were graded, her irritation was palpable. She stood at the front of the room, holding his paper between her fingers like it was a piece of garbage. "Darnell, she called out, her voice dripping with disdain. "It must be nice to think you're smarter than everyone else. But if you're going to cheat, at least make it less obvious." The accusation hit him like a punch to the gut. "What?" he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "You heard me," she said coldly. "There's no way you got these answers on your own." The room erupted in murmurs. Darnell felt his chest tighten, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "I didn't cheat," he said, his voice trembling. "Save it for the principal," she snapped. "You can explain yourself to him after class." When the bell finally rang, Darnell's hands were shaking as he packed his things. His notebook felt heavier than ever in his backpack, its pages filled with every instance of her cruelty. As the other students filed out, he stayed behind, unsure of what to do next. "Let's go," Ms. Albright said, gesturing toward the door. Her tone was devoid of any warmth, but before they could leave, the door opened. Standing there, clipboard in hand, was Principal Harris. His presence instantly shifted the energy in the room. His warm but commanding demeanor filled the space, and even Ms. Albright seemed momentarily caught off guard. "I'm here for an observation," he said calmly, his eyes scanning the room before landing on Darnell. He noticed the tension in his son's posture, the redness around his eyes, and the way Ms. Albright stood with her arms crossed, looking almost triumphant. "Is everything all right here?" Mr. Harris asked, his tone measured but firm. Darnell hesitated, his heart pounding. This was the moment he had been dreading and waiting for. The classroom felt like it was holding its breath. Ms. Albright, flustered but trying to maintain her composure, stepped forward with a tight smile. "Principal Harris, how wonderful of you to visit. We were just wrapping up a discussion about academic honesty." "Academic honesty," Mr. Harris repeated, his gaze steady. "What happened?" Ms. Albright's tone became clipped. "I caught Darnell cheating on his quiz. The answers were too perfect to be his own work." Darnell flinched, his head bowed. He wanted to speak up, but the weight of her accusation and the weeks of mistreatment left him frozen. Mr. Harris noticed this immediately. "Darnell, is that true?" he asked, his voice calm but filled with concern. "No, sir," Darnell said quietly, finally meeting his father's eyes. "I didn't cheat." "He's lying," Ms. Albright said sharply, crossing her arms. "The evidence is right here." She waved the quiz paper like it was some kind of smoking gun. Mr. Harris stepped closer, taking the paper from her. He scanned it, his brows furrowing. "This handwriting is his. I've seen it for years." His voice was even, but there was an edge of disbelief. "What makes you think he cheated?" Ms. Albright hesitated. Because the answers are too advanced for a child his age. It's impossible." "Impossible?" Mr. Harris repeated, his tone hardening. "Or is it that you underestimated him?" The air in the room seemed to shift. Ms. Albright opened her mouth to reply, but Mr. Harris raised his hand to stop her. "Before we go any further, I'd like to see the rest of the class's quizzes. Let's compare." As Ms. Albright fumbled to retrieve the papers, Mr. Harris turned to Darnell. "You've been quiet about this. Has something else been going on?" Darnell hesitated, glancing at Ms. Albright, who shot him a warning glare, but this time he couldn't hold it in. "She's been treating me differently," he said, his voice steady despite his nerves. "She picks on me, calls me out in front of everyone, and says things that make me feel like I don't belong." Mr. Harris's jaw tightened, but his expression remained composed. "Is this true, Ms. Albright?" Her face turned pale. "I don't know what he's talking about. I treat all my students equally." Darnell reached into his backpack, pulling out the notebook he had been hiding for weeks. "I've been keeping track," he said, handing it to his father. "Everything she's said and done. It's all here." The room was silent as Mr. Harris flipped through the pages, his face unreadable. When he finished, he closed the notebook and looked at Ms. Albright. "You've had concerns about Darnell's behavior?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. "Yes," she stammered. "I mean, he's been disruptive." "Then why is there no record of these concerns in my office?" Mr. Harris pressed. "Why haven't you followed the protocol for addressing behavioral issues? And why does it seem like every example Darnell documented was petty or unjustified?" Ms. Albright's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Her polished demeanor was cracking under the weight of the moment. Mr. Harris turned to the class, his voice firm but inviting. "Has anyone else noticed this kind of behavior from Ms. Albright? You don't have to say anything if you're uncomfortable." But if you've seen or experienced something similar, now is the time to speak." The students exchanged hesitant glances. Then Malik, always Darnell's quiet supporter, raised his hand. "She's been unfair to Darnell," he said. "A lot. She calls him out for stuff other kids do all the time. And she says things that aren't right." One by one, other students began nodding and chiming in. "She's mean to him," one said. "She's harder on him than the rest of us," added another. Ms. Albright's face was now a deep shade of red. "They're just children," she protested. "They don't understand." "Children or not," Mr. Harris interrupted, his voice steely. "Their experiences matter. And what I'm hearing paints a very troubling picture." The weight of the students' testimonies settled over the room like a heavy fog. Miss Albright fumbled to defend herself, her words frantic and disconnected. "I've always held my students to high standards," she stammered. "Perhaps Darnell just isn't used to being challenged." "Challenged?" Mr. Harris repeated, his voice now cold. "There's a clear difference between challenging a student and targeting one. From what I've seen, this is not about high standards. It's about personal bias." Ms. Albright froze, her face contorting with a mix of defiance and panic. I don't have any bias. I'm simply trying to do my job." Mr. Harris nodded, his composure unwavering. "And part of your job is fostering an environment where every student feels valued and supported. Instead, you've alienated a child, my child, and created a hostile atmosphere in your classroom." The final blow came when Mr. Harris opened Darnell's notebook again, flipping to the last few entries. He held it up, addressing the room. "This is evidence," he said, his voice steady but resolute. "Painstakingly documented by a 10-year-old boy who should never have had to carry this burden." The students watched, wide-eyed, as their principal turned back to Ms. Albright. "You've not only failed as an educator, but you've also betrayed the trust this community placed in you. Effective immediately, you're relieved of your teaching duties pending a full investigation." Ms. Albright's breath caught, her face pale as the weight of his words sank in. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "I am," Mr. Harris replied. "Gather your belongings. You'll be escorted off school grounds." Ms. Albright stormed out, her heels clicking against the floor, leaving the classroom in stunned silence. Mr. Harris took a deep breath before turning back to the students. His tone softened, his warmth returning. "I know this has been a difficult day," he said, looking around the room, "but I want each of you to know something very important. You have a voice, and your voice matters. If you ever feel unheard or unfairly treated, don't hold it inside. Speak up, just like Darnell did." He placed a hand on Darnell's shoulder, pride shining in his eyes. "It takes courage to stand up for yourself, especially in the face of adversity. Darnell, you've shown a strength that many adults can only hope to achieve. I'm proud of you, son." Darnell's heart swelled, and for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to smile. That afternoon, the story spread through the school like wildfire. Teachers, parents, and students alike learned about what had happened in room 206. While many expressed shock and disappointment, others commended Mr. Harris for taking swift action. In the following days, the school implemented new training sessions for staff, focusing on inclusivity and unconscious bias. It was clear that change was needed, and the incident with Ms. Albright had opened a long overdue conversation. The week after Ms. Albright's departure brought a sense of renewal to Crestwood Elementary. Darnell's story had become a symbol of resilience and the importance of standing up to injustice. Mr. Harris, true to his values, ensured that the school didn't simply move on from the incident, but used it as an opportunity to grow. In a special assembly, Mr. Harris addressed the entire school. Standing on the stage in the gymnasium, he spoke with both authority and compassion. "Education isn't just about teaching facts and figures," he began, his voice echoing in the hushed room. "It's about creating a space where every child feels seen, heard, and respected. We failed to do that for one of our own, and for that, I take full responsibility." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "But this is also a moment for learning, for all of us. We must do better, not just in our classrooms, but in how we treat one another, how we listen, and how we stand up when we see something wrong." The audience erupted in applause, a wave of solidarity sweeping through the gym. Darnell, sitting with his classmates, felt a sense of pride he hadn't known before. For the first time, he didn't just feel like a kid navigating a difficult situation. He felt like someone whose voice had made a difference. In the weeks that followed, changes rippled through the school. Teachers underwent training on cultural sensitivity and inclusive teaching practices. The students too were encouraged to participate in discussions about fairness, respect, and standing up for one another. Darnell's classmates, inspired by his courage, began to see him in a new light. Even those who had been bystanders in Ms. Albright's classroom started to speak out when they noticed unfairness. Malik, his best friend, summed it up during recess one day. "You're like a superhero, man," he said with a grin. "You didn't even need a cape." Darnell laughed, shaking his head. "I'm no superhero. I just couldn't let it keep happening." "Well, whatever you are, it worked," Malik said. "Things feel different now. Better." At home, Darnell sat with his parents at the kitchen table, the infamous notebook between them. He had shown his father every page, walking him through each entry. Mr. Harris had listened intently, his expression a mixture of pride and sadness. "You know," his mom said, her voice warm, "you've taught all of us something, Darnell. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is speak up, especially when you feel like no one will listen. But you did, and look what came of it." Darnell smiled, but he felt the need to clarify. "I didn't just do it for me. I did it because, what if she was like that to someone else? Someone who didn't know what to do?" Mr. Harris nodded, his eyes gleaming with pride. "That's what makes what you did so important. It wasn't just brave, it was selfless." As the school year continued, Darnell found himself thriving in ways he hadn't before. His confidence grew, bolstered by the support of his classmates and teachers. Room 206 had a new teacher now, one who treated every student with respect and fairness. And as for Ms. Albright, her removal served as a cautionary tale for educators everywhere. Prejudice has no place in the classroom, and children are more resilient and perceptive than many give them credit for. On the last day of school, Darnell walked through the halls with his head held high. He stopped by his father's office, notebook in hand, and placed it on the desk. "You're done with it?" Mr. Harris asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah," Darnell said. "I think it's time to move on." Mr. Harris smiled. "That's a good decision, son." Darnell nodded, stepping back into the hallway where his friends were waiting. The lessons he had learned, about courage, fairness, and the power of speaking up, would stay with him forever. And in a small way, he knew he had changed Crestwood Elementary for the better. A 10-year-old boy risked his life to save a girl trapped in a burning car. But when her wealthy family found out who he was, they didn't celebrate him. They wanted him out of the picture. The air was thick with the smell of burning rubber. 10-year-old Kamari Wade was walking home from Alcorn Street, his backpack slung over one shoulder, the weight of his schoolbooks making him lean to one side. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving streaks of orange and purple across the sky. He had walked this route 100 times before, past the old gas station with the flickering sign, past the diner where the waitresses called him baby when he came in with his grandmother, past the stretch of road where the streetlights were too far apart, leaving patches of darkness in between. That's when he heard it, a deep metallic groan, the kind that didn't belong in the stillness of the evening. Then a sharp crunch, like something heavy collapsing. Kamari stopped, his heart tapping a little faster. The road ahead curved around a steep hill, and beyond it, nothing but trees and silence. He took a few steps forward, then saw it. A car flipped on its side, smoke curling from the hood. Glass shimmered in the dim light like scattered diamonds, and the front bumper was twisted against a tree. A low, sputtering sound came from the engine, like it was struggling to keep breathing. Kamari froze. Should he run for help? Should he even get closer? His grandma always warned him about getting into things that weren't his business. But then he heard something else, a faint sound, barely more than a whisper, a voice. He dropped his backpack and ran. The car's front windshield was a web of cracks, but through it, he could make out someone inside. A girl, maybe a little older than his sister. Her head was tilted awkwardly, blood streaking the side of her face. Her lips moved, but the sound was too weak. "Hey! Hey! Can you hear me?" Kamari shouted, pressing his hands against the broken glass. The girl stirred slightly, a weak whimper escaping her throat. His hands were shaking, but he didn't think. He just acted. Kamari scrambled to the other side of the car, his sneakers crunching over glass and metal. He could smell the smoke thickening, turning acrid in the back of his throat. The car door was crushed in, its handle barely visible under the warped frame. He tugged at it. Nothing. He planted his feet, gripping harder. Still nothing. "Come on, man," he whispered, his fingers slipping against the jagged metal. A sudden crackling noise made him whip his head up. The smoke was turning darker now, rising fast. His stomach twisted. He looked back at the girl, her eyes fluttering, barely open. He had no time. Planting his foot against the wreckage, Kamari reached through the shattered window, his small arms barely fitting through. The jagged edges scraped against his skin, but he ignored it. His fingers found fabric, her sleeve. "I got you," he murmured. He pulled. She barely moved. "Help!" he screamed, his voice cutting through the trees. But the road was empty. No headlights in sight. It was just him. Kamari adjusted his grip and yanked harder. The girl groaned, her body shifting slightly. She was wedged in. He let go, panting, his brain scrambling for something, anything. His eyes darted to the shattered windshield. Could he break it more? Could she crawl out? He snatched a loose piece of metal from the ground and slammed it against the glass. A crack, again. Another crack. On the third hit, part of the windshield caved inward. Kamari reached through, ignoring the sting of fresh cuts on his skin. His fingers found the girl's arm again. "You gotta move," he said, his voice urgent but steady. She moaned softly. Kamari pulled with everything he had. Her body shifted. He pulled again. Her torso slid forward. And then, suddenly, she tumbled out. Kamari staggered back, catching her as best he could. She was heavier than he expected, her limbs limp, her breath shallow. Then, a loud hissing sound. Kamari's eyes snapped up. The smoke had turned thick, black, angry. Flames licked at the dashboard inside. The car was seconds away from going up. His arms burned from holding her up, but he forced his legs to move. One step, then another. Then he was running, dragging her with him. 10 feet, 15, 20. Then, boom! A blast of heat slapped his back, knocking him forward. The ground rushed up to meet him, and for a second everything spun. Then, silence. Kamari lifted his head. The car was on fire. Flames curled around the frame, swallowing the wreckage whole. If he had waited any longer. A sharp cough made him look down. The girl. She was alive. Barely, but alive. Kamari exhaled, his chest rising and falling like he had just run a marathon. He heard the distant wail of sirens now, the glow of emergency lights flickering against the trees. He looked at her face, pale, streaked with blood, barely holding on. She had no idea who he was. And in a few minutes, when the paramedics took her away, she probably never would. But something about this moment told Kamari that this wasn't the end of the story. Not even close. The flashing lights of the ambulance faded into the distance, swallowed by the night. Kamari stood there for a moment, his heartbeat still hammering in his ears, the heat from the fire still tingling against his skin. He could feel the tiny cuts on his arms where the glass had scraped him, the fabric of his shirt damp with sweat. But there was no time to think about any of that. His grandma was waiting. And if he didn't get home soon, she'd start worrying. So he did what he always did. He picked up his backpack and kept walking. The next morning, nothing felt different. The world still moved like it always had. Cars honked, kids laughed. The smell of frying bacon from Mr. Leary's corner store wafted into the street. The sidewalk was still cracked in the same places, the same rusted chain-link fences lining the yards of houses that had seen better days. Kamari sat at the kitchen table, chewing on a piece of toast, his legs swinging under the chair. Across from him, Grandma Birdie shuffled through a stack of bills, muttering under her breath. "You eating that toast or just holding it for decoration?" she asked, eyes never leaving the papers in her hand. Kamari took another bite. "I'm eating it." She peered at him over the top of her reading glasses. "You quiet this morning?" He shrugged. "Just tired." Birdie didn't ask any more questions. She just sighed, rubbing the back of her neck, then grabbed her purse from the counter. "I'm heading to work. Walk your sister to school. And don't let me hear about you running that mouth with them boys on the block again." Kamari nodded. He was always nodding. His older sister, Tiana, stomped into the kitchen with all the attitude a 12-year-old could pack into one body. "You better not slow me down today," she huffed, stuffing a notebook into her backpack. Kamari rolled his eyes, but didn't argue. 10 minutes later, they were walking toward Hawthorne Elementary, the cracked sidewalk bouncing under their sneakers. The street was alive with the usual morning sounds: dogs barking, car doors slamming, music drifting from someone's open window. Kamari knew every face in the neighborhood, every shortcut, every place to avoid. And most of the time he didn't think too much about the things that weren't his business. But that day, his mind kept drifting back to the night before, to the car, the fire, the girl. What was her name? Was she okay? He shook the thoughts away and tried to focus on the present. But something told him he hadn't seen the last of her. At school, things were the same as always. The teacher droned on about fractions, the smell of dry erase markers thick in the air. Kids passed notes. The old AC unit rattled above their heads, trying its best to keep the classroom cool. Kamari sat near the window, his fingers tapping against his desk. At lunch he met up with his best friend Tyrell, outside near the basketball courts. "What's wrong with you?" Tyrell asked, taking a bite of his sandwich. "Nothing. You look weird, like extra weird." Kamari kicked at the dirt. "You ever do something but you don't know if you should talk about it?" Tyrell squinted at him. "Like a crime?" "No, fool." "Then what?" Kamari hesitated. He knew how things worked. If you weren't somebody, nobody cared, and he wasn't somebody. But last night, for just a few minutes, he had been. He sighed. "Forget it." Tyrell shrugged. "Suit yourself." But Kamari couldn't forget it. That night, after homework and dinner, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The whirring fan above him cast long, moving shadows across the walls, but he barely noticed. Somewhere across town, that girl was waking up in a hospital bed, and she had no idea who had saved her life. But that was about to change. Emma Caldwell opened her eyes to blinding white light. For a second, everything was a blur. Beeping machines, the steady hum of voices outside the door, the dull ache pulsing through her body. Her head felt heavy, her throat dry like she hadn't spoken in days. Then she remembered. The road, the rain, the sharp jolt as the car spun out of control. Her chest tightened. She shouldn't be here. She should be. "Emma?" She turned her head, slowly, and saw her mother standing at the foot of the hospital bed, hands clasped together like she was praying in secret. "Baby, do you know where you are?" Emma swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hospital." Her mother's shoulders sagged with relief. "Oh, thank God. The doctor said you suffered a concussion. You have a broken rib, but, Emma, you could have died." She didn't need the reminder. Her father, Charles Caldwell, stepped into view. Stoic as ever. Even now in his tailored suit, not a strand of silver hair out of place. He looked like he had just come from a board meeting instead of sitting by his daughter's hospital bed. "Who saved me?" Emma asked, her voice scratchy. Her mother's brows knitted together. "A boy, young. We don't know his name yet. But the paramedics said if he hadn't pulled you out when he did, you wouldn't have made it." Emma blinked, trying to piece it together. She remembered flickers of movement, hands reaching for her, a voice telling her to move. But the memory was hazy, like a dream slipping away before she could grasp it. She wanted to thank him. "We need to find out who he is," she murmured. Her father sighed. "Emma, let's focus on your recovery." Her mother, however, didn't seem as dismissive. "I agree. We need to know who saved our daughter's life. We owe him." Charles Caldwell didn't like the word owe. Emma saw it in the way his jaw tensed. "Let's not make this a spectacle," he said, voice even. Her mother ignored him. She turned toward the nurse who had just walked in. "The paramedics said the boy left before they could get his name, but someone must know who he is." The nurse hesitated, shifting uncomfortably. Emma noticed. "You know something?" She pressed. The nurse sighed. The paramedics said the boy looked young, maybe 10, 11. They think he might be from... A pause. Then, carefully, South Side. The room went still. Emma's mother pressed a hand to her chest. Her father's expression barely flickered, but Emma saw the shift in his eyes. South Side. That was all they needed to hear. Kamari sat at the counter of Birdie's corner store, unwrapping a pack of now and laters when the bell over the door jingled. He didn't look up at first. The store was always busy in the afternoons, filled with people grabbing a soda or a snack on their way home. But then he heard it. That voice. "I'm looking for a boy. About 10 years old. He would have been here last night." Kamari's chewing slowed. He turned, and there she was. A woman, standing tall, dressed too nice for a place like this. Like she didn't belong here. Kamari knew that look. He'd seen it before, on teachers who thought they were saving kids like him. She hadn't noticed him yet, scanning the store like she expected him to pop out of thin air. Birdie, standing behind the counter, did not look impressed. "We got plenty of boys that age," she said flatly, ringing up a customer's purchase. "You got a name?" "I don't," the woman admitted. "But my daughter, Emma Caldwell, was in a car accident last night. A boy saved her. We need to find him." Silence. Kamari felt Birdie's eyes on him. He kept his head down, unwrapping another piece of candy. The woman let out a breath. "Please, I just want to thank him." Birdie didn't answer right away, but Kamari already knew what she was thinking. Finally, she sighed. "What do you want with him?" The woman hesitated. Kamari didn't miss it. "I told you," she said carefully. "We owe him." Birdie looked at her long and hard. Then she nodded toward the counter. "Boy you're looking for is right there." Kamari felt the air shift as the woman turned, and just like that, for the first time, Emma Caldwell's mother was looking straight at him. Kamari met her gaze, but he didn't say anything. The woman, Mrs. Caldwell, studied him for a second, her eyes flickering with something he couldn't quite name. Relief? Shock? Something else? "You're the boy who saved my daughter," she said, more like a statement than a question. Kamari just popped another piece of candy into his mouth. Birdie folded her arms. "What exactly do you want with him?" Mrs. Caldwell hesitated, smoothing a hand down her expensive-looking coat. "I just want to talk. Properly. I want to thank him." Birdie's eyes narrowed. "You already said that." Silence stretched between them. Kamari could tell Mrs. Caldwell wasn't used to being questioned. Finally, she turned back to him. "Would you mind coming with me? Emma would like to see you." Kamari blinked. Emma. That was her name. He had wondered about her, but he wasn't sure if he actually wanted to meet her. It wasn't like he saved her for a reward or anything, but Birdie was watching him now, waiting for him to decide. So he shrugged. "Yeah, I guess." Mrs. Caldwell exhaled, relieved. "I'll drive you." Birdie's hand shot up. "Hold on. I don't know you. I don't know what you're about. Kamari's my grandson, and I'm not letting him go anywhere with just anyone." Mrs. Caldwell's expression stiffened. "I can assure you I mean him no harm. My daughter is in the hospital. I just want to give him the gratitude he deserves." Birdie didn't look convinced, but she didn't argue. Instead, she turned to Kamari. "You sure about this?" Kamari wasn't sure at all, but he nodded. Mrs. Caldwell led him outside to a sleek black SUV parked at the curb. The door clicked open without her touching it. Kamari had never been in a car like this before. The inside smelled like leather, and something expensive he couldn't name. The seats swallowed him up the second he sat down. Mrs. Caldwell pulled out her phone as the driver pulled off. Kamari stared out the window. The streets of Southside blurred past. Corner stores, barber shops, kids playing in front yards with chain-link fences. The farther they drove, the more things started to change. The streets got wider. The buildings got taller. Everything looked newer. By the time they reached the hospital, Kamari felt like he had stepped into another world. Emma was propped up in her hospital bed, flipping through channels on the TV with a bored expression when the door opened. She turned and froze. For a second, she just stared at Kamari. Then her eyes widened. "It's you." Kamari shifted, suddenly feeling awkward. He wasn't sure what he expected, but he hadn't expected this. "You remember me?" he asked. Emma nodded slowly. "Not everything, but I remember your voice. You told me to move." Mrs. Caldwell stepped aside, letting them have their moment. Emma swallowed. "They told me what happened. How you—" She exhaled, shaking her head. "You saved my life." Kamari shrugged. "I just did what I could." Emma's eyes softened. "That's not just anything." She studied him, like she was trying to figure something out. "You live on Southside, don't you?" Kamari stiffened. He knew what she meant, what everyone meant when they said it like that. But before he could say anything, the door swung open again. Mr. Caldwell walked in, and the second he saw Kamari, his expression shifted. The air in the hospital room shifted the moment Charles Caldwell walked in. His sharp eyes locked onto Kamari, scanning him like he was an equation that didn't quite add up. The boy in front of him didn't look like someone who should have been anywhere near his daughter, let alone the reason she was still breathing. Kamari felt the weight of the man's stare, but he didn't look away. Emma was the first to speak. "Dad, this is Kamari. I know who he is." Kamari could tell by his tone that it wasn't a compliment. Mr. Caldwell stepped further into the room, his polished shoes silent against the pristine floor. He didn't reach for a handshake. "You saved my daughter's life." It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir," Kamari said, his voice even. There was a beat of silence. Then Mr. Caldwell exhaled sharply, slipping his hands into his pockets. "Well, that's fortunate." Emma's eyes narrowed. "Fortunate?" Her father didn't acknowledge her. Instead, he turned to his wife. "Why is the press asking about him?" Mrs. Caldwell tensed. "What?" "I just got a call from the Tribune," he said, irritation laced in his voice. "They want to run a story about the young hero who saved the Caldwell heiress." His gaze flickered back to Kamari. "I assume you didn't go looking for attention?" Kamari frowned. "No, sir." Emma sat up straighter. "So? Let them write it. People should know what he did." Mr. Caldwell wasn't convinced. He turned to Kamari, studying him like he was looking for an angle. "What do you want?" Kamari blinked. "Huh? What do you want in return?" It took Kamari a second to realize what he was asking. Money. That's what Mr. Caldwell thought this was about. Kamari's stomach twisted, but he kept his face blank. "I don't want nothing." Mr. Caldwell's expression didn't change. Emma looked horrified. "Dad, he's not here for a payout." Her father ignored her, still staring at Kamari, like he was waiting for a lie to slip out. Then finally he sighed. "I'll handle the press." Mrs. Caldwell frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means this doesn't become a story." His voice was clipped, final. "We don't need reporters digging into things. It's better for everyone if this stays quiet." Kamari understood exactly what that meant. Mr. Caldwell didn't want the headlines to read, "Poor black kid saves rich white girl," because then people would ask questions, and men like him didn't like questions. Emma looked like she was about to argue, but her father was already pulling out his phone, sending off a text. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, already walking toward the door. "A word, please." She hesitated, then followed. The second the door closed behind them, Emma let out a sharp breath. "God," she muttered, running a hand through her hair. "I'm so sorry." Kamari just shrugged. He had already figured out how this would go. Rich people like Mr. Caldwell didn't like being in debt, especially not to kids like him. Emma sighed. "My dad's complicated. He doesn't trust people easily." Kamari wasn't stupid. That wasn't it. Her father just didn't trust people like him. But before he could say that out loud, his grandma called. He pulled out his old Nokia and pressed it to his ear. "Yeah?" Birdie's voice was tight. "Come home. Now." Something was wrong. Kamari's stomach knotted. "I gotta go," he muttered, stepping back toward the door. Emma looked disappointed. "Wait, will I see you again?" Kamari hesitated. Then finally he nodded once. Emma smiled. Then he was gone. The second Kamari stepped onto his street, he saw the problem. Reporters. They were everywhere. Cameras, microphones, people standing outside Birdie's shop like it was a crime scene. "Hey kid, are you the one who saved Emma Caldwell?" "Kamari, how does it feel to be a hero?" Hero. The word made his stomach turn. He pushed through the crowd, ducking into the store. The second the door shut behind him, Birdie was on him. "What did you do?" Kamari's chest tightened. "Nothing. I didn't say nothing to nobody." Birdie exhaled, rubbing her temple. "Well, somebody did, 'cause now we got news vans camped out front. And you know what that means?" Kamari swallowed. "What?" "It means this ain't just about you anymore." She wasn't wrong. The media loved a feel-good story. But what happened when the cameras left? When people moved on? What would happen to him? To his family? Kamari suddenly wasn't sure if saving that girl was the best or worst thing he'd ever done. For the next 2 days, Kamari couldn't leave the house without a camera in his face. People he'd never met before were calling him a hero. The news played his story like it was some kind of fairy tale. Brave young boy saves heiress from fiery wreck. Except Kamari wasn't living in a fairy tale. He was living in Southside, where the grocery stores barely stocked fresh produce and the streetlights flickered when they weren't completely busted. Where police drove slow through the neighborhood but never stopped to help. And now, suddenly, everyone cared. For how long, though? Kamari knew the answer. Not long. Emma Caldwell hadn't stopped thinking about him. Her phone buzzed constantly with texts from friends who wanted the inside scoop. Her Instagram flooded with messages from people who had never spoken to her before. But Kamari? She hadn't heard from him since the hospital. Her father had kept his word. He handled the press, just like he said he would. The reporters were already moving on to the next big thing. Soon, the world would forget Kamari Wade even existed. But Emma wouldn't let that happen. Kamari sat on the stoop outside Birdie's shop, head low, hoodie up. "Boy, stop sulkin'," Birdie muttered, sweeping the sidewalk. "You act like you got a reason to be ashamed." "I don't like all this," he grumbled. "I didn't do nothing special." Birdie stopped sweeping, looked at him hard. "You pulled a girl out of a burning car," she said. "You did what grown men might have run from." Kamari stayed quiet. She sighed. "Listen to me. The world don't decide if you're special. You do." Before he could answer, a sleek black car pulled up. Kamari already knew who it was. The door opened, and Emma stepped out. Not her mum, not a driver. Just her. She walked up to him, arms crossed against the cool breeze. "Can we talk?" Birdie smirked. "I'll be inside," she muttered, disappearing into the shop. Kamari glanced at Emma. "You're supposed to be resting." She snorted. "I've done nothing but rest." They sat in silence for a second. Then Emma reached into her pocket. "Here." She handed him a folded piece of paper. Kamari frowned. "What's this?" "My dad's lawyer wrote up a check," she muttered. "A lot of zeros. My parents think that's the only way to say thank you." Kamari's stomach turned. Emma sighed. "I told them you wouldn't take it." She wasn't wrong. Kamari didn't need their money. Money wouldn't change the way Mr. Caldwell looked at him in that hospital room. Money wouldn't stop the reporters from forgetting about him next week. "I don't want it," he muttered. Emma smiled. "I know." A beat of silence. Then she pulled out a second piece of paper. "But maybe you'll take this." Kamari raised a brow. "What is it?" "My school," Emma said. "They have a scholarship program. I asked my mum to pull some strings." Kamari stared at the paper. Full ride, everything covered. He swallowed. "Why?" Emma leaned back. "Because you didn't ask for anything, and that's why you deserve something." Kamari's fingers tightened around the paper. He had never imagined something like this. Not in a million years, and maybe this wouldn't change the world. Maybe tomorrow the news wouldn't care. Maybe his neighborhood would stay exactly the same. But this was something real. Kamari exhaled. Then finally he smiled. Some heroes don't wear capes. Some don't ask for the spotlight. Some don't even realize they're heroes at all, but the right people see them. And sometimes that's all that matters. If you believe in doing the right thing, even when nobody's watching, don't forget to subscribe. Stories like these deserve to be told.
He never raised his voice, never fought back, until the day the school bully slammed him in front of everyone and found out exactly who he was messing with. Most kids at Kennedy Middle had a group. Some rolled deep with the basketball team. Others huddled around sketchy bathroom vape deals or gossiped in cliques near the vending machines. Elijah Braxton didn't fit in anywhere, and he didn't try to. At 13, Elijah had mastered the art of invisibility. He wore neutral colors, carried a quiet presence, and always had his old, weathered sketchbook pressed tight to his chest like a shield. His sneakers were never new, his hoodie sleeves a little too long. But the boy could draw. Man, could he draw. He didn't talk much, but the lines in that book said everything. Angry wolves, falling cities, a mother holding her son in a burning house. Stuff that made you stop and look again. But no one at Kennedy really noticed that, because no one really noticed Elijah. Except when they did. He sat in the second-to-last seat in the back row during math, kept his eyes low, and avoided raising his hand even when he knew the answer. It wasn't about fear. It was about staying safe. Kids like him didn't get attention. They got laughed at, shoved, or worse. There was one moment last fall, just one, where he let a tiny piece of himself peek out. Mr. Rosen, the art teacher, had held up Elijah's sketchbook to the class. "This," he said, "is raw talent." Elijah didn't smile. He didn't look up. He hated it. That day someone poured water on his backpack in the locker room. No one admitted it. Elijah didn't say a word. That's how it was. Keep quiet, stay in your lane, and you might make it out without a permanent scar. He wasn't lonely, though. Not really. After school, he'd walk back to their little apartment in the northeast corner of Toledo, Ohio. 2 bedrooms, creaky floorboards, and that scent of turmeric and garlic always floating from the kitchen. His mom worked 2 jobs and never let the world wear her down. And Malik, his older brother, was like a built-in protector. 5 years older, part-time mechanic, full-time brother. Malik had hands like bricks and a stare that could stop you mid-sentence. But when it came to Elijah, he turned into this gentle giant. He'd peek over Elijah's shoulder while he sketched, never judging, just quiet. One night, he noticed the bruises on Elijah's shoulder. "You fall?" Malik asked. Elijah hesitated, then nodded. But Malik wasn't stupid. "You let someone put hands on you again, I'll show you something real." Then he handed Elijah a worn blue belt. "From back when I trained. You're gonna learn now. I don't care if you never use it, but you go know how to move if someone touches you wrong." And so, in the middle of their tiny living room, with laundry baskets shoved to the side and their mom yelling from the kitchen not to break anything, Elijah learned balance. How to breathe. How to stay standing when someone tried to knock you down. He didn't like fighting, but he liked control. And jiu-jitsu wasn't about punching people in the face. It was about staying calm when everything went sideways. About knowing you could do something, even if you didn't. Back at school, Elijah kept to himself. But now, he walked just a bit different. Like someone who knew something nobody else did. He still got bumped in the hallway sometimes, still heard little laughs behind his back, still pretended not to hear his name whispered with a smirk. But he stayed silent, because it wasn't time yet. But the moment someone noticed him again, it wasn't the way he expected. And it came from the worst possible person. It started with a locker slam, not the kind that echoes down the hallway and gets a teacher's attention. No, this one was quiet, personal, meant for only one person to feel. "Hey, sketchbook," the voice said. Your face always look that sad? Or you're just saving it for math class? Elijah didn't turn. He knew the voice. Everybody did. Miles Redfield, 8th grade, red hoodie, new Jordans. Always surrounded by 2 kids who laughed too hard and never said anything of their own. Miles wasn't the kind of bully that chased you down the hallway yelling threats. He was calculated. He picked targets the way a snake might watch a rabbit. Slow, deliberate, waiting for the right moment to strike when nobody else was looking. And somehow Elijah had caught his attention. At first it was just the nicknames. Sketchbook, silent film, emo kid. Then it turned into shoulder bumps between classes, just enough force to make Elijah drop his books. The hall would keep moving like nothing happened. Even the teachers saw it sometimes, and looked the other way. Elijah said nothing, picked up his stuff, kept walking. But Miles hated that. He wanted a reaction. Something, anything. So he kept pushing. One morning before homeroom, Elijah opened his locker to find shredded pieces of his homework scattered everywhere. His pencil pouch was gone. In its place, someone had stuffed a moldy sandwich and a note that read, "Lunch for the artist." He didn't cry, but he did sit there for a long time, just staring at the mess. His hands were clenched, but not shaking. Just still. Mr. Dobbins, the PE teacher, passed by. Glanced over. Didn't stop. Elijah cleaned it up and walked to class. At home, Malik saw the scrape on his elbow and the wrinkle in his shirt collar. "Someone touched you again?" Elijah shrugged. "Say the word, and I'll walk through those halls with you." "I got it," Elijah said quietly. "I'm fine." Malik didn't press. But he did go back to drilling him harder in the living room. That night, Elijah learned how to block from a standing grab. He practiced over and over until his muscles remembered it better than his mind. Back at school, Miles wasn't done. Not even close. Friday. Cafeteria. Elijah moved to his usual corner seat with his tray. Rice, beans, overcooked chicken patty, untouched carton of milk. He opened his sketchbook with his fork still in his hand. Then a tray slammed down across from him. "You ever draw yourself crying?" Miles asked, flashing that fake grin of his. "Bet that page would be fire." Elijah said nothing. "You too good to talk, huh?" Miles leaned in. "Act like you got some kind of superpower or something." Elijah closed his book slowly. Not scared. Just tired. "Why don't you talk?" Miles asked again. "That's what I don't get. You walk like nobody can touch you. That what your brother taught you? That big dude with the busted car and the second-hand tools?" Elijah didn't flinch, but he looked up for the first time, right into Miles' eyes, and held the stare. That was the moment it shifted. Miles wasn't used to that. Not from the quiet ones. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even angry. Just steady. Miles stood up slowly, then shoved Elijah's tray off the table. It clattered on the floor, splashing milk and beans across the tile. The whole table looked over. Some laughed. Most didn't. Elijah stood, picked up the tray, walked to the trash, sat back down, kept sketching. But in Miles' eyes, that calmness, more than any punch, was disrespect. And the next time he laid hands on Elijah, he'd make sure there was an audience. On the second floor of an aging walk-up just off Dorr Street in Toledo, you'd find apartment 2B, the Braxtons' place. The kitchen window didn't close right. The heater made a thumping noise in the winter. And every night, Elijah fell asleep to the sound of his mom's phone alarms going off before her next shift. The apartment wasn't perfect, but it had heart. His mom, Sharonda Braxton, was the kind of woman who held the whole family together with nothing but her will and a chipped coffee mug. She worked long hours at the hospital cafeteria, then cleaned offices downtown on weekends. Even when her feet hurt and her wrists ached, she'd still stop by Elijah's room before bed, touch his forehead and whisper, "You good, baby?" She didn't ask questions when he said yes, but she always knew when something was off. Then there was Malik, 19, 6'2", hands stained with motor oil from the garage job he worked 4 days a week. He was built like a defensive lineman, but walked like someone raised by a tired mom, soft, careful, never wasting words. After dinner, the living room turned into a practice mat. The coffee table got pushed aside, couch pillows tossed onto the floor for padding, and Malik would start their drills. "You ever been grabbed from behind like this?" he asked one evening. Elijah shook his head. "You might. And when you do, you ain't thinking about it. You just move." He showed him how to pivot his hip, shift his weight, trap the arm, roll out. Then again. Malik didn't yell, didn't push him past his limit, just watched, corrected, made sure Elijah understood what his body could do when his mouth stayed quiet. Elijah liked those nights more than he ever said out loud. It wasn't just the moves, it was the rhythm. The way Malik's voice stayed low, the way their mom would peek in from the hallway with a towel over her shoulder and half a smile, like she was proud and worried all at once. "You sure about teaching him all this?" she asked one night, folding clothes on the couch. "Better he know and never use it," Malik replied. "Then not know and wish he did." Their mom nodded, didn't say more, but she looked at Elijah like she knew the weight he was carrying. And maybe, in her own way, she was helping him carry it too. Later that night, Elijah sat on the floor of his bedroom, sketchbook in his lap. The page was almost full. 2 boys in a cafeteria, one standing, one sitting, the tray mid-air, the milk frozen in time. He didn't draw their faces, didn't need to. He looked at the page for a long time, then flipped to a blank one and started again. This time, he drew hands. Open, in motion. One grabbing, one deflecting. Each stroke had precision now, not just creativity. Control. Saturday morning, Malik knocked on his door. "Put on shoes." "Why?" "We're going to the park. Time you feel what this stuff means outside 4 walls. At Wilson Park, the grass was half dead, and the basketball court had cracks in the concrete, but nobody cared. It was alive. Kids running, old men laughing loud while slapping down dominoes. Elijah and Malik found a quiet patch of grass behind the rec center. There, Malik showed him how to fall safely, how to use someone's weight against them, how to take a hit, stay breathing, and move. "You don't ever gotta be the biggest," Malik said, kneeling beside him. "Just the one that doesn't panic." That stuck with Elijah. So did the look Malik gave him afterward. It wasn't just brother to brother anymore. It was something more like, "You're ready." But even with all that practice, nothing could prepare Elijah for what would happen next, when practice turned into reality. And this time, everyone would be watching. It was Tuesday, mac and cheese day, the kind where the tray was mostly orange slop, but at least it didn't come with mystery meat. Elijah walked the line like always, head low, tray in hand, sketchbook tucked under his arm like armor. He scanned the cafeteria, found his usual corner seat, near the window, 3rd table from the back, left side, out of the way. But today, he wasn't fast enough. "Move!" someone said behind him. Trey bumped his lower back. He turned slightly. It was Miles. Again. Behind him, those same 2 kids, Zeke and Cody, trailing him like shadows. Elijah didn't say anything, just stepped aside. Miles laughed, exaggerated it, loud enough for heads to turn. "You're like a scared little mouse, man." "You ever make a sound?" Elijah slid into his seat. Opened his sketchbook, blocked everything out. Or tried to. A few minutes later, Miles appeared across the table. No tray. Just standing there, eyes locked on Elijah like he'd finally picked the exact moment to act. "You draw me yet?" he asked. Elijah didn't look up. "Bet you did. Probably made me look all evil or something, huh?" Miles chuckled to himself, then leaned over and grabbed Elijah's sketchbook. Elijah's hand shot out fast, gripped the edge. "Let go, bro," Miles said, tugging harder. But Elijah didn't. Instead, he stood. The cafeteria got quiet real fast. This wasn't normal. Elijah never stood, never resisted, never said a word. Miles jerked the book again. "You deaf or stupid?" Still holding it, Elijah said one word. Just one. No. It was quiet, but clear. Miles's eyes flared. What did you just say? I said no. Then, in one sudden motion, Miles let go of the sketchbook and shoved Elijah backward, hard, both hands to the chest. Elijah stumbled 2 steps, caught his balance. The book hit the floor with a slap. Everyone saw it. It was like the lunchroom hit pause. Even the lunch lady stopped scooping. Elijah didn't go for the book. He stepped forward. Miles smirked, thought he had him. But Elijah grabbed his wrist, just like Malik taught him, and twisted it. Not to hurt, just to control. He didn't throw a punch. He didn't yell. He shifted, pulled, pivoted. And in 3 seconds, Miles was on the floor, hard, flat on his back, mouth open, red in the face. Shocked more than hurt. Gasps went around the room like static. Elijah didn't pose, didn't gloat. He just looked down for a moment, breathing slow, then picked up his sketchbook and walked away. That's when Mr. Furlong, the 8th grade science teacher who'd been eating lunch with the staff in the corner, suddenly stood up. Hey, Braxton, stop right there! Elijah did. Come with me. Now! He didn't argue. Just followed him quietly, out the double doors and down the hall toward the office. Back in the cafeteria, nobody laughed. Zeke and Cody stood there, stunned. Even the teachers were slow to move, like their brains couldn't process what just happened. Miles stayed on the floor for another 10 seconds before scrambling to his feet and throwing a tray in anger. He's crazy, man! Kid's crazy! But no one backed him up. Nobody clapped either. Just silence. But as Elijah sat in the front office, waiting for the principal, the real noise began to build. Not in the room, but in whispers across the school. Because for the first time, they saw what happened when someone quiet finally had enough. Elijah sat in the blue plastic chair outside Principal Aldridge's office. His sketchbook rested on his lap. He didn't open it, didn't tap his foot, didn't look nervous. Inside, voices rose and fell. She needs to know what her son did, Mr. Furlong said sharply. That wasn't just self-defense. He was being harassed, another voice replied. It sounded like Ms. Lindstrom, the art teacher. I've seen it. So have others. Elijah stared at the floor tiles. One was cracked, a little sliver missing near the edge, just like the hallway, just like the school, just like so many things that get stepped on over and over until they fall apart. The door opened. Elijah, Principal Aldridge said, her voice low but tight. He stood up and walked in. Aldridge sat at her desk. Mr. Furlong to her right, Ms. Lindstrom on her left. None of them looked comfortable. Elijah, Aldridge said again. Let's talk about what happened today. He didn't answer. Do you understand why you're here? He nodded. Do you want to tell us what happened in the cafeteria? He paused. Then, he took my sketchbook. And you responded by putting him on the ground. I didn't hit him. Furlong leaned forward. You threw him. No, Elijah said, quietly but firmly. I moved. Aldridge sighed. There's a line, Elijah. Even if someone's provoking you, Ms. Lindstrom cut in. And what about the line that got crossed before this? We all knew Miles was messing with him. How long have we looked away? Nobody spoke, because she was right. Finally, Aldridge folded her hands. We'll be contacting your mother. We'll have to file a report. Elijah nodded once. You can wait in the counselor's office for now. He stood, picked up his sketchbook, and left. That afternoon, Sharonda Braxton walked into the front office with her work uniform still on. She didn't yell. She didn't make excuses. She listened. Then she turned to Principal Aldridge and said, You know how many times I told this school my son was getting harassed? Aldridge opened her mouth, but Sharonda cut her off. I got the emails. I got the voicemails y'all never returned. I told you when he came home with a bruised arm. I told you when he stopped eating lunch, and now you want to talk about what's too far? Furlong looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. Sharonda turned to Elijah. Baby, you okay? He nodded. Good. Then let's go. But Aldridge stood. Mrs. Braxton, we're still reviewing what happened. No, you're reacting to what finally happened. That's different. They left without another word. By the next day, everyone knew. The video was everywhere. Some 8th grader had filmed it from 2 tables over. No commentary, no edits. Just the moment Miles got put on his back and the quiet kid walked away. Some said Elijah should have been suspended. Some said he should have been applauded. Most didn't know what to say, because the truth was, Miles wasn't just a bully. He was a mirror. He reflected everything people let happen. The hallway bumps, the whispered names, the way teachers looked the other way, the way silence became easier than action, and Elijah had broken that mirror. Not with fists, but with the quiet, sharp movement of someone who'd been trained for a moment like this, not to hurt, but to protect. Even Miles didn't talk much the next day. He came to school late, sat in the back of class. No one sat with him at lunch. Elijah returned to his usual seat. But this time, no one bothered him. Some kids glanced his way, like they wanted to say something, but didn't. And that was fine. He didn't want praise. He wanted space. He just opened his sketchbook and kept drawing. But things didn't stop there, because now people started asking questions. Not about what Elijah did, but why it ever got that far. The week after the cafeteria incident, something shifted at Kennedy Middle School. Not in some big, dramatic way. There were no assemblies, no school-wide speeches, but the silence changed. Whispers turned into side conversations. A few students started asking each other things out loud, stuff that had been sitting under the surface for a long time. Why didn't any of the teachers stop Miles before? Did you ever say anything when he shoved that kid last semester? Why is it always the quiet ones that got to take the hit before anyone pays attention? For the first time, the spotlight wasn't just on Elijah. It was on the adults. The system. The way problems only became real when someone got hurt bad enough. Ms. Lindstrom brought it up in her staff meeting. She said Miles had been bullying kids for years, not just Elijah, and when she asked why no one intervened, nobody had a good answer. Mr. Dobbins, the PE teacher, said, "He's just a loud kid. We all got those." To which Ms. Lindstrom replied, "A loud kid doesn't make 3 students stop coming to school because they're scared." That landed like a punch in the gut. Parents started calling in. One mother said her son had stopped riding the bus because of Miles. Another said her daughter transferred schools after weeks of harassment, and no one ever called her back. It wasn't just about Miles anymore. It was about every time a teacher shrugged off a complaint. Every email that got flagged for follow-up, but never answered. Every moment a kid like Elijah was told, without words, that being quiet meant being invisible. Principal Aldridge was forced to act. She ordered a formal review of past complaints, sent a letter home about creating a new student safety task force. It sounded nice, polished, but for the kids, it wasn't about policies. It was about watching what happened next. Miles, for his part, kept his head down. No one made fun of him, but no one defended him either. His circle shrunk. Zeke and Cody kept their distance now. It's funny how loyalty fades when it's no longer safe. Meanwhile, Elijah became the face of a conversation he never asked to start. Ms. Lindstrom invited him to talk during advisory period. "Only if you want to," she told him. No pressure. He said no at first. But later that week, something changed his mind. He walked past a 6th grader crying quietly by the water fountain. Her binder was on the ground, papers everywhere. A few girls stood nearby laughing, pretending they weren't the reason. Elijah stopped, picked up the girl's papers, handed her the binder, looked at the girls, didn't say a word. And they walked away. The girl looked up at him like he was a superhero. That night, Elijah agreed to speak. It wasn't a speech. It wasn't long. He stood in front of 25 classmates in room 108, his sketchbook clutched to his chest. "I don't like talking," he said. "But I'm tired of pretending like silence means nothing's wrong." He paused, flipped his sketchbook open. held it up. The page showed a kid standing alone in a hallway. Behind him were shadowy figures, some with smirks, some with crossed arms, some just walking by like nothing was happening. People say bullies are the problem, Elijah continued. But sometimes it's the people who see it and look away. No one said anything. He closed the sketchbook. If someone like me can stand up, maybe some of you can too. He didn't stay after, didn't wait for praise. He just walked out. But that short moment in room 108 sparked something Elijah couldn't see right away, because sometimes the smallest voices end up echoing the loudest. 2 weeks after the lunchroom incident, things didn't magically get better, but something was different. The hallways weren't louder. The bullying didn't vanish overnight. But eyes were open now. People were paying attention. And Elijah Braxton? He stayed the same. Quiet. Hoodie still too big. Sketchbook in hand. But now, when he walked down the hall, people moved out of his way. Not in fear. In respect. Even teachers watched him differently. Not like a troublemaker, not like a mystery, but like someone they owed more than they'd ever admit. Mr. Furlong didn't say much after that day in the office, but during one class, he gave Elijah a nod when he turned in his project. That was it. Nothing more, nothing less. Elijah didn't need more. At lunch, he still sat alone, except on Fridays. That's when one kid, Isaiah from 7th grade, started sitting near him. Didn't talk much, just ate quietly. Then another joined the next week. Then one more. It wasn't a group. It wasn't a movement. It was a shift. In the library, Elijah was invited to submit his drawings to the end-of-year showcase. Not just the wolves and cities, but the cafeteria scene, the hands in motion, even the faceless hallway kids. Ms. Lindstrom framed them herself, but what stuck with Elijah most was something that happened outside school. He and Malik were walking home from the corner store, bags in hand, when a man with a buzz cut and a bright blue vest approached them. Said he was a parent from Kennedy. "You're the kid, right?" the man asked. Elijah tensed, unsure. The man smiled, a little awkward. "My son's in 6th. He told me what you did. Said it made him feel like maybe he could speak up too." Elijah didn't know what to say, so the man just added, "Thank you." That night, back in his room, Elijah pulled out his sketchbook. Drew 2 boys on a sidewalk, one older, taller, walking just a step behind the other. They weren't speaking, but there was light coming from behind them, casting long shadows ahead. He looked at the page, then wrote one word in the corner: enough. The next day, in English class, Ms. Amari asked everyone to write a 1-page reflection on someone they admired. Most kids chose athletes. A couple picked parents. One chose a YouTuber. Elijah wrote about his mom. "She works 2 jobs," he began, "and still finds a way to check if I ate." Then he added something at the end that surprised even him. "I used to think staying quiet was the only way to stay safe. But I learned that sometimes silence lets the wrong people get louder." He turned it in, folded neatly. No sketch this time, just words. A few days later, Principal Aldridge called him in again. But this time, the conversation was different. "Elijah," she said, sitting across from him, "we're starting a peer-led student support group. We'd like you to be part of it." He hesitated. "You don't have to say anything. Just be there." After a long pause, Elijah nodded once. That Friday, he sat in a circle of 5 kids. One girl talked about being mocked for her accent. A boy mentioned how no one believed he was being followed after school. No one had a solution. They just listened. And Elijah? He sketched while they spoke. But at the end, he said, "You're not weak because you didn't fight back. You're not soft because you're tired. You're just human, and people need to start treating each other like that." And they listened. Because when Elijah spoke now, people leaned in. Not because he raised his voice, but because he meant every word. And for the first time in his life, Elijah Braxton wasn't just seen, he was heard. Life won't always hand you justice. Sometimes it hands you a choice, to keep walking or to take a stand. Elijah chose the second. Quietly, powerfully. If this story made you feel something, take a second to subscribe. Stories like this deserve to be heard and shared.